Hello, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about growing peaches in containers and answering questions that you might not know to ask. I know a lot of times you want to start doing something and they ask you have any questions and you really don't know what questions you're going to have until you start doing it. Now, I've been growing fruit in containers for about 15 years now. The last 10 to 12 years it's been more peaches and plums and blueberries and things of that nature. So I've been doing it a while. I've seen the successes and the failures and some of the things that I messed up on. And I'm going to kind of tell you what it's like. I'm not trying to glamorize it, but just trying to show, trying to provide good information that will help you and not waste a bunch of money trying to do something that may not work at all. First thing is, why would you want to grow them in containers? There's different reasons. Number one reason may be soil. If you don't have very good soil, you have a tight clay soil and in a high rainfall area, we're in a 55-inch rainfall belt where I'm at, you may want to keep them in containers just for the drainage portion of it. You may not have space. You may have, disease problems, nematodes, things of that nature that would be better grow them in pots. You may start growing things in pots. Most people are going to do it because they're limited in space, or they want to do different varieties. Since they don't take up as much space, you can have several different varieties in the same space you would have, 3 or 4. So anyway, first question is, what type of a peach tree do you need to buy? By type, there's 3 basic types. You have the standard variety that you get at the store. Everybody sells them. You have a semi-dwarf type, and then you have a miniature or dwarf, according to which one where you're looking at it. But miniature and dwarf is the same tree when it comes to peaches. Standards works fine. A little bit high on the vigor a lot of times. They're going to have a very vigorous rootstock. Usually they're going to be Nemagard or Lovell, one of those types. All these trees on regular rootstock, no special rootstock. The size of the pot themselves will dwarf the plant, so it's not as critical as a lot of people make out to be. So you really don't need a dwarf rootstock if you don't want one. The good thing about using standards, you've got a lot more varieties that you can choose from. The other one is semi-dwarf. And when you see semi-dwarf, to my knowledge, there's only one semi-dwarf rootstock. It's Citation. It works well in the western part of the United States. It does not work well when you start picking up a lot of humidity. It's susceptible to bacteria canker. It just doesn't last very long. I've tried to grow some in the past. I won't buy them anymore. The roots themselves doesn't produce a lot of roots. I'm wanting the roots to go ahead and fill up the pot so so the tree itself isn't moving inside the pot. I did try some in the ground one time and they just didn't last very long, died within a year or 2. And like I say, I won't ever grow them again. Like I say, if you don't have a lot of humidity, I think they'll be fine. It's not necessarily a bad rootstock, it's just a rootstock that doesn't fit for me. The third kind is one that I'm going to be honest with you, I have never grown. I've always wanted to grow them, but I have researched some, and that's the dwarf varieties. And that's the ones that they only get about this tall, and they have really short internodes, and they're kind of a novelty to a great extent. There's not a whole lot of varieties. I'm going to talk about varieties later, but they're also an option. And if I was going to go on the smaller pots, 5 gallons to even the 5-gallon bucket or 5-gallon pots, which a 5-gallon bucket has a lot more soil in it than a 5-gallon pot because of the way they measure them. But that size, yeah, I think you might want to go with the dwarf. But again, you want to get the right variety on those. There's only a few varieties out there. They haven't really tested a whole lot of them. And like I said, I'll get back to that in a little bit. Second question, what size of a container do you need? Now, honestly, if I'm going to grow a standard peach tree, I want to this is a 15-gallon pot here. Can you see it? These are lick tubs for cattle. They're probably 35-gallon pots. They work fine. I wouldn't go with a 5-gallon pot because unless you have some type of drip system that you're going to put them on, some type of way to water them, because if you put them in a 5-gallon bucket, you can do that, but you have to water them every day in the summertime. And what I mean by every day, I mean every day. You skip a day or 2, they're dead. So, this pot would probably need to be watered every other day. But these pots could probably go every 3 days without needing any watering. One thing I would stress on you when you're watering pots and you get an inch rain, think, hey, I don't have to water that day. An inch rain is not that much water for these pots. You know, that's only going to water down so far. So if you're having something you having to water every day and you get a rain, you're probably still going to need water that day. So, and I know that from experience from growing tomato plants. Put them in these bigger pots, need water every day because those root system gets massive. You get a rain, get a half-inch, inch rain, think I don't have to water them that day, and that next day they suffer big time. So just to let you know that rains, unless you get 3 or 4 inch rain, they really don't water these pots as much as you think they do. Varieties. What variety do you need? You can order any variety that is adaptable to your site. That does not mean any variety that they sell at even the local nurseries. You know, I still see down here Alberta Peach. Alberta Peach needs 800 chill hours, or they won't bloom and they will struggle, and they sell them down here all the time. You know, they're just not going to make it down here. So get a peach tree, and I also try to get a peach tree that has a fairly low chill hours, because that way if they bloom early, I can move these things around. I can move up against the house. I can put them in the garage. So if they bloom in February, I'm still good to go. Last year we had a late, it was in March 20th, we got a freeze that got in the upper 20s, wiped out all the fruit trees in my orchard. But these trees here was the only things that produced any peaches last year, because I was able to take these peach trees, either put them in the garage or put them up next to the house. It gave them that couple of 3 degrees, you know, where it was warm enough that they didn't freeze. And I made peaches off these, you know, that year. The only peaches I made. Another reason to be able to grow them is sometimes you get those years, and at least you get some peaches. So some of these, now this is Trilite Aprim. I would not suggest this one because it's not made anything this year, and everything else is made. So I'm about ready just to put it in the ground just so I can use the pot and kind of forget about it. If it makes it in the ground, fine. But this one is a nectarine. Nectarines are a little troubling down here because nectarines get diseases fairly bad. But in a pot, you're gonna get a lot more airflow through them, so that works. But be careful of nectarines, because that's the first one everybody wants to grow because they really taste better than peaches, but for most people. This is a different one that I'm trying. It's a Roddenberry, but Tropic Snow and Tropic Beauty is two that's worked really well for me in containers, and they're both over there. We won't move the camera yet. But you know, they're really, you know, they're good varieties to grow. I do have, this is a Tropic Beauty, and that's about the size that you're going to look at, that you can get. You're not going to get these huge ones, you know, big ones, but you can get pretty good size if you thin them right and do them right. If I remember right, these are, so you can just, this is one I just got through cutting. I see they're real pretty, you know, very pretty peach. So, here you go, son. This has a really good taste to it. Like I say, it's the Tropic Snow is the white peach, and I've grown Rio Grande, early Rio Grande, a little bit lower, and so just get one, and chill hours is temperature between 45 and 32 degrees. You get during the winter time, and you need a certain number of hours for these peach trees, or most fruit trees need a certain number of those hours or they won't bloom right. So with that, you know, get some that's adapted and you'll be all right. I also try to get some that mature early. That way you're not fighting diseases. That's the bad thing about this Roddenberry, because it's going to be another month or two before it's ready. So I'm going to have to be spraying it more often, and you know, trying to keep the brown rot and the worms off of it. So that's just consideration also. With the ones not to buy, as far, like I said, one with high chill hours around here, and that would be, I'm in zone 9A, and I have about 550 chill hours every year. So I'm not going to go for some of the really good flavored ones, that 750, 800 chill hours, just because they're not going to make down here. Now, if you're in 8B or 8A, the new 8B, you're probably okay with those higher chill hours. So just find out what your chill hours are. You know, you can Google that, find out, and then try to get ones at that level, maybe a little bit lower than that. Now, normally you try to stay within 100 either direction, but again, the chill hours for Tropic Snow and Tropic Beauty is about 200, somewhere around in there, and I get 550. I know they're going to bloom early, but then I can protect them because we don't get a whole lot of cold weather, you know, after about February 1st. You know, we're not going to get one or two, maybe one good freeze. Even in January, sometimes we don't get a lot of cold. So you can move them around since they're in pots, especially if you're in an apartment complex and you're on the south side. You're not going to get near as cold as people on the north side or areas that get where the wind blows as much. Now for the dwarf varieties, ones not to buy if you want for eating, Bonfire. Bonfire is a very pretty purplish leaf, reddish leaf dwarf. The food, from what I've understood, even the critters don't like the peach flavor. The fruit's basically inedible, doesn't have any flavor to it. So if you want it for an ornamental, that's fine. I think every pretty blooms on it also, but you're not going to be able to eat the fruit. Bananas and Eldorados, know too that they say the flavor on it's not very well. They're some of the older varieties. Now, as far as if you're trying to grow peaches, the Honey Babe is supposed to be the best of the dwarf peach. Pixzee is another one that's supposed to be pretty good. Sweet Sensation has no more fuzz on it. They're saying it's better than the older varieties, probably not as good as Honey Babe, but and if I remember, I'll put these down there on the list, on the comments. The one you hear the most about on the nectarines, I said don't do it, but like I said, I've got a nectarine too. Nectazee is nectarine, miniature dwarf nectarine is known as the best flavored from what I've on my research. If I buy one, that's probably the one I'm going to get. Artic Sprite is one that has some red tones in the fresh itself, so that's another one supposed to be pretty good. Artic Babe is a good one, and then Nectar Babe is another good one. So those are all going to be all those short, you know, short noted, so they're not going to get very big. Now, one thing about that, just so if you want to know, if you try to graft a regular peach tree on one of these dwarfs, the graft will grow regular. You know, it doesn't transfer to because it's the internode itself that's dwarfing. It's not the rootstock. The rootstock, I think, is all on level rootstock. So it's not the rootstock like on apples and things of that nature. Apples and pears, sometimes they will have dwarfing rootstocks, but that's the rootstock that's dwarfing, not the stem. So just something I've learned. So if you decide, okay, I want to grow another variety, what type of potting mix do I put in these pots? It doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. You don't want one that holds too much water. If you have too much water, it's going to make it waterlogged in the wintertime potentially, and you have problems with it rotting the roots and dying. What I've used for a lot of these, and there's some, I mean, this is a rule of thumb, okay? But it's 5 parts pine bark, and you want the kind that's the smaller pine bark. It's not, you don't want the big chunks. Bring it over here, but you're kind of seeing the pine bark stuff here. You know, this kind of size, that's kind of what you're wanting. You're not wanting those big 1 or 2 inch chunks that you find. Sometimes they call it pine bark mulch. Anyway, that works pretty good. You have 5 parts pine bark, 1 part peat moss, 1 part perlite. That's by volume. Mix that together. Now, if you want one that's got a little more, you know, a little more water retention, you put a little more peat moss in it. You could potentially put compost. I don't like putting compost because, again, compost is going to break down faster. But try to get one that's, and really there's not very many good ones in the stores, because the stores are usually, they're selling it as an annual potting mix. Don't get potting soil because it may have native soil in it. Soil does not work good in pots. So it's cheaper to make your own because these things get expensive. And you know, pine bark mulch is going to cost you $3.50, $4 a bag. You know, now it's about almost $20 for, and that's for 2.5 cubic foot. Well, for 2 cubic foot of peat moss, I mean a pine bark mulch is $3, $4. So it's a lot cheaper. It works better. And like I say, these trees can stay in these pots. I've done it up to 10 years. What's going to happen at some point in time, it's going to collapse. At that point, that's when your tree really loses vigor. You need a pot. But you're looking more at least getting 5 years out of these things without having to go back and repot. At least I have been. So it's not, you know, some people say we need to repot every year or every other year. If you put the pine bark mulch on there, you don't have to. You can also put stuff like diatomaceous earth in there. Expanded shell works really well if you can find it, but mostly that's in Central Texas and North Texas. But if you can find that, that works well in these pots too, because it keeps it. Sometimes you'll see in these pots that they'll get really hard. The water can't get in them. That's usually when you got too much peat moss in them, because peat moss will get hydrophobic. It'll repel water once it gets really dry, and it's really hard to get it back wet again. So anyway, how often do you need to water? Kind of answered this before. The smaller the pot, the more often you have to water it. These pots here, every other day. That pot's there maybe every third day. And it's kind of the rule of thumb, and that's once they get big and tall. Fertilizer. You do need to go with a complete fertilizer. There is a trade-off. You don't want to put too much fertilizer in it because vigor is not a good thing. You don't want this thing getting too vigorous. You don't want this thing growing, you know, this much in 1 year. You know, 18 inches in an orchard setting is what you're shooting for in the orchard. In these type of trees, you don't want that much growth because you're not going to put as much fruit on them. And the more vigor you got, the more root bound they're going to get. The other problem you get is this tree here will blow over really, really easy because it's tall. This is a much better sized tree. What I should have done when I bought the thing was cut it down to here, let it branch out so it'd be shorter, won't blow over as much. You know, it just makes a better fruit tree. When you get them tall like this, that's not good. This is the deal, do what I say, not what I can do. This one has a better form. I like the size of this one. I still haven't pruned it for this year, but you know, try to spread them out so the limbs kind of go out. It's kind of different than what you would do with a pear or apple tree. Apple tree that kind of have a center column. These are open vase. And like I say, this one's a little bit better because you got these side shoots coming out. That's kind of what you're wanting. But go with the complete fertilizer. Osmocote makes it really easy. I also use Miracle Grow. There's a Foliage Pro that's probably a better fertilizer. So, you know, just kind of consider that. But you're gonna have to go with the complete fertilizer. I like synthetic fertilizer better on pots. I make some people mad when I say that. Organics are just more difficult, and you got to make sure, do you have enough boron in it? Do you have enough copper in it? Do you have enough magnesium in it? Do you have enough manganese? So if you're going to be putting organics in there, you can't say, hey, I'm going to use fish meal. I'm going to use, you know, blood meal. Or I'm going to use these different types of stuff. I'm going to use compost. Does it have all those, you know, chemicals in there? Because if it doesn't, your tree's going to suffer. The other thing you have to have with organics is they have to break it down, and it's hard to keep that biology in these pots going. So, you know, have people done it? Yes. Do I do it? I did occasionally, but to me, if I need nitrogen and I want to do with blood meal, yeah, blood meal will work okay. It also draw critters to your area too. Another problem sometimes you have with organics is your pets and stuff may like it. They're not going to eat the synthetic fertilizer. It does not taste good. I got Dobermans that I sit there and I'll let them smell it every once in a while just to see, and they look at me like, why you got that in the cup? So, but you don't want to apply too much fertilizer. Like I say, don't get them too vigorous, but you also don't want them to stall out on you and not grow at all, because they're going to put the peaches on the new growth. So you do have to prune them back, get some new growth on them, but you're not looking for that 18 inches of growth like you would out there in the orchard. Number 7, disease and disease management. I was going to bring it out. These things will get diseases on them. Now, you may go 3 or 4 or 5 years and not have any diseases or any worm problems. And then all of a sudden, 1 year, they'll hit. I've not had that much disease problems, and then this year we've had we probably had close to 55 inches of rain this year, and it's not even, we even got halfway through the year. And normally with a 55-inch rainfall belt, we got a year's worth of rainfall in 6 months. And what happens is you get these things right here. This is mummified fruit, and when that gets on them, it ruins them, and then all these little bitty stuff that you see on them are spores, and then next year this will fall to the ground, and they'll throw out spores for next year. Once you get this stuff going, it's going to be there. Even if you miss a year with no fruit at all, those spores are still there for 2 years down the road. So once you get that, you're going to have to spray. And the only thing that you can really spray on these when it comes to that particular disease, and that's called brown rot, is going to be one of your synthetic pesticides or fungicides. Pesticides is true, but fungicides a more accurate name. Get some that does good for brown rot. Now, the best one that I know of is one called Infuse. You can buy it, at Amazon or whatever, and it works pretty good. You do have to do it about every 2 to 3 weeks. You want to get started early, because once that fungus gets on that plant, you may not notice it, you won't see it, but then right before it starts ripening up, it's going to go bad on you. And what you do is you got a perfectly good looking, almost ripe. This thing is almost ripe, but guess what? It's got brown rot on it. And it's going to ruin it. That's what it looks like before it mummifies. And I've had whole trees get wiped out by that this year. Didn't get to spray it when I needed to. Was busy going to the hospital, back and forth to the hospital, and that happened. So, but you usually won't see that in the first couple of 3 years. So that's something that's going down the line. The other problem you'll have is a thing called Plum Curculio, and you have to spray it with some type of insecticide. I'm gonna be honest with you, triazinide works really well on them. And what they'll do is they'll make a dot and a crescent moon on it. And what it is, they'll make a dot where they lay the egg. The crescent moon is the slit that they put in so that the worm can crawl in that little slit, and that's where you get the worm. They're little bitty. I've seen them before. They're really shy little beetles that lay them in there. They're lazy, so they're not gonna move all over. And usually it occurs when you have 3 nights in a row, it hits 70 degrees and low, that's when they come out. This year it's kind of weird because we didn't have that much of it, not that much pressure with them. Some years are really bad, some years are not. But that's another thing that you might have to spray for, or you can cut around them. I mean, the worms aren't quite as bad as the brown rot. Brown rot would destroy them. The others, you just may have to cut around the worms. But that's something else. I kind of went with malathion because what I can do is put the malathion on late during the day, and then by the time the next morning comes up, I don't think it's gonna hurt the bees that bad, because you do got to be careful. You don't want to spray in the middle of the day because you got bees flying around. And malathion, almost everything that was going to kill Plum Curculio is going to kill honeybees. So that is a consideration, that you should have. I also will put down copper and dormant oil in the fall or late, right after the leaves fall off, or they should be falling off in November, December. You can spray it with it. When you spray that copper, it's going to knock the leaves off the tree. And then you might want to do that again, or if you forgot to do it right before these things bud out, is another time to do it. Now, some of the problem with doing it then is the fact that you think, okay, they're fixing to bud out, the leaves are fixing to go, and then you go somewhere for a week, or it rains, you don't get around it, and then all of a sudden they're out. So I would do a dormant spray early, dormant oil spray to kill any scale or anything else that gets on, and that's about all the spraying. I mean, it's a lot of spraying. You might want to wait till you have a problem and then you start spraying, so you're not spraying, because I don't like preventative spraying, but with these things you're going to have a problem with them. So they're just a high maintenance tree. And like I say, if you're going in an apartment complex or you're in town where not a lot of people have peach trees or whatever, you can get by with it for a few years. So, I waited whenever I was in Beaumont. I had no problems for, I think, the first 3 years, and had a little bit the 3rd year. In that 4th year, I had some problems. And then we, I think after that we moved or whatever, but it was fixing to get, where I was going to have to do on a spray regimen. This year, I've got wiped out with it, so I'm gonna have to go back into a regular spray regimen probably from now on. Number 8, how long before diseases come? 3 to 5 years. So, you know, again, if I was the first time I was buying it, me personally, I think you're better off to buy bare rooted trees, and that's if you're ordering through the mail, planting those bare rooted trees, just because if you buy one of those in a 5-gallon or 7-gallon pots, they may contain, stupid gnats, they may contain some of that disease. But anyway. Okay, what causes worms? It's a Plum Curculio, and you can look that up. There is a spray, if you want to go organic with it, that works pretty good. I think they say 50% effective. So if you get 50% of the fruit doesn't have it, which that's enough. So I got this stupid net on that. But it's around Kaolin Clay, and basically what you do, you spray that. It's a white powder. It's a special type of Kaolin Clay that they've had to process it correctly. You can't just go out and get any type of clay. And they're sprayed on these leaves. They turn them white, and it irritates the beetles, or whatever, that Plum Curculio. And spread all over the tree. They're not going to climb up the tree. They stay out of it, and that works pretty good. But every time it rains, you got to apply another coat on it. So out here, I'd be spraying continually. So if you're more up in Central Texas where you don't get as much rain, or a little bit drier areas, that is a good alternative. I did buy some one time, and then we got the flood, and I lost it in the flood. So, but it's, you know, it's not a bad alternative. I have no problem at all with organics if they work, but some organics just don't work, and but that one does, and that's a good thing. By the way, spinosad does not work good on Plum Curculio, so just so you know. How long to wait before you let these trees fruit? You hear a lot of people say you ought to wait 2 to 3 years before you let any fruit mature on your tree. Okay, that's true on pears, apples, and things of that nature. Peach trees, nectarine trees have a high vigor, and growing down south, I don't know about growing up north, you may have problems. Down south, they got enough vigor in them. You can harvest the fruit the first year you buy those trees. It's not going to stunt the trees out. They don't stunt like the apple trees do. And you're going to stunt them anyway in this pot. So, you know, first year this thing came in, I let it fruit. And we ate fruit off that first year. What you can't do, or what you shouldn't do, is try to set this tree right here where you get a multitude of fruit on it. And I'll show you here, hopefully if I remember, I'll show you in a minute what can happen. But let's just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and pick up the camera, and I'll show you if you don't thin enough what happens. And I'll show you everything. I've been busy. This tree looks really good, but look how many fruit I had on that limb. Way too many. And we had a rain, and it broke this. It broke it. Now it's still getting some water, so I'm gonna try to let these go ahead and ripen. But you know, that can happen. So I'm gonna have to cut this back to here and try to regrow it. This one has had some diseases. This is the tropic snow, and you know, they're pretty good peach, and look how much smaller than they were. And I picked it off the same tree. The one I ate was picked off this tree, and you can see this one is bigger. Now, one thing I will say on thinning fruit, that once it gets about the size of a quarter, it's not getting any bigger no matter how much you thin it. You still need to thin them from breaking your trees, but once it gets, so when you want to thin them, is about the dime to the nickel size, and that way you pick that fruit off, and your other peaches on that tree will get bigger. The problem with having too many fruit on a tree is limb breakage, and also you get these little bitty small peaches, and you know the seeds are going to be about the same size anyway. So go ahead and pick them off, get your bigger fruit. You get probably more actual flesh of the fruit because you're not getting all these seeds you had to pick out of them. It's hard to do. This tree over here, I've done a better job of it, and you'll notice these fruits are bigger. And actually, that's Tropic Beauty over there. This is Tropic Snow. And that one is one though that's got too many because you got two of them. These two like that, you ought to take that off. This one's okay. They're not. You don't want the peaches to touch. That's a little close, but there's not that many out here, so that does work. Again, over here I messed up. Then picked this one. This one should have been picked off. So, but there's not a whole lot. It's not going to break the limb itself. This one's also got some diseases on it. They're not going to live a long time. You're not going to get 20 years out of these trees. You might get You know, these trees are, I know, 5 years old. I've had some up to 10 years it's lasted. And so, you know, that's good to have. You know, I've enjoyed it. They do well. However, another word of caution on these donut type. This is one, and it just, all these mummified fruits. We didn't get any fruits. Well, you got a few, didn't you?
Yeah.
But they all turned in. What I need to do is pick all these off and throw them in the trash, haul them off. Don't let them stick around because they will spread for the next year. But your saucer type peaches do tend to get brown rot much worse than a regular peach. The fuzzier the peach is, the more resistance they're going to have to them. That's why your nectarines cause problems. But nectarines taste good, so it's kind of that, you know, I play that battle. Fire ants. If you live down south, you have a problem with fire ants. Best thing that I've learned on fire ants with these pots is use the Orthene fire ant killer. It is not labeled for orchards. However, if you get, you know, if I get fire ants in this one here, what I'll do is you'll pick up the pot, you'll move it over. The fire ants are down here, you'll sprinkle it around here, set the pot back, you'll kill those fire ants. The fire ants in here get killed when they leave, and you have to kill them. And the roots never come in contact with that poison. So technically, you're still going by label. You're not putting it in, you know, I think you're safe at that because when you water, you're watering down, so you're not letting that poison come up into your fruits. Sometimes you gotta be careful. You don't see as much problems with peaches, but sometimes the roots will escape these pots, so you want to move them around every once in a while. The other thing that can happen with these pots, if you got them on the ground, is the other trees can go up in the roots. So you want to move them around sometimes just to make sure no other tree roots are invading the plant. Watch out for fire ants because they will, you know, really cause a lot of problems. But you know, it is doable. Now, if you have any other questions, put them down in the comments. I will answer them. But that's the 10 basic questions, a couple of bonus ones to get you started. Hey, I think it's worth doing. You know, and I'm not one that tries to talk you into spending a bunch of money and doing all that. But you know, the hardest thing is you have to fertilize it and you're going to have to water it, and they're going to need that. You know, in the summertime, 2 to 3 days. Needing water in even these big pots. And if you go on vacation, who's going to water your plants? And like I say, I did a video the other day showing how much these went a week without before, and this is cooler weather. We're not getting the hot temperatures, and they went without water. They were saturated, and 6 days later they looked really bad. And if I let them go another couple of days, they'd have died. So you can't sit there and run off and leave them. You do have to take care of them, but you know, it is very doable, and hopefully I've answered any questions. If I didn't, like I said, leave them down in the comment. Thanks for watching.